Once you've played a single Unturned map for a while, you get more and more loot, generally discarding inferior supplies and replacing them with higher quality ones. Think back to your most prestigious world. You probably have many high-tier guns, ammunition, food, and armor. You're probably wearing some combination of military clothes or even spec ops gear, or perhaps even a ghillie suit if you feed off the misery of others. But once you've found your endgame clothing set, what more have you done to enrich that? If you're like me, you would simply put it on and then forgot about it indefinitely. Usually my clothes would all eventually hit 0%, and it would stay that way pretty much forever. But am I doing something wrong? Should you care about repairing your armor? Let's take a closer look. Before we address the problem specifically, let's take a broader look at the effects of quality on different items. Quality, as you may know, is the number ranging from 100% to 0% to determine the condition that an item's effects have. As an example, the higher quality a food item is, the better its hunger restoration will be. It's always better to have higher quality items, but how intense the penalty is for having low quality will vary, depending on the type of item. The different types of items affected by quality are food, weapons, some attachments, and clothing. Weapons, both melee and ranged, will have their damage output modified by the quality of the item. Weapons inflict their maximum damage output from quality levels 100% down to 50%. At 50%, the damage output of the weapon is decreased by 1% for every 1% quality under 50. For example, a weapon at 50% deals 100% damage. A weapon at 25% deals 75% damage, and a weapon at 0% will deal 50% damage. Therefore, it could be said that the metaphorical quality threshold is placed at 50%, when the output of the weapon starts to become affected by the quality level. Additionally, ranged weapons suffer from an accuracy loss pretty quickly after hitting the threshold, though hipfire is much more heavily affected than aiming down sights. Food takes a slightly different approach. As you may know, consumables from 100% to 50% are completely safe to eat, but consuming food and water below 50%, the quality threshold, will inflict some immunity loss upon consumption. The actual amount of immunity damage taken will depend on what food or drink you consumed. For every 1% quality below 50%, 1% of the food's total hunger restoration will be taken in immunity damage, capped at 50%. For example, an apple juice box restores 20% water at full. Therefore, drinking a 50% apple juice will result in 0% immunity loss. Drinking a 25% quality apple juice will result in a 5% immunity loss, because 25% of 20, which is the total potential water restored, is 5. Drinking a 0% apple juice will result in a 10% immunity loss, because 50% of 20 is 10. Additionally, foods that restore both hunger and thirst lose the combined total of the two. For example, eating a 0% canned sardines, which would normally restore 40% food and 10% water, will result in a 25% immunity loss, because half of 50, the combined total, is 25. Oh, and for those who are wondering, yes, the wiki does state that the threshold for food lies at 47%, not 50. But after some testing, I concluded that it was actually 50%. That being said, most food items that will have low quality, as in the items you find on the ground or drop from zombies, won't be a problem until around 47%. So here's where things start to switch it up. We talked about food immunity, but the actual hunger restoration doesn't follow the same rules. The amount of hunger restoration you get from consuming foods is completely linear. A food at 100% quality will grant 100% of its maximum restoration. A food at 50% grants 50%, and so on. It's entirely linear from top to bottom. The percentage you see on the food is the same percentage of its maximum that you'll receive. A Attachments, such as suppressors, muzzles, arrows, and certain clothes, such as the gas mask and biohazard hood, follow a sort of Boolean pattern. As long as they're above 0%, they function perfectly. But as soon as they hit 0%, all function stops. The barrel attachments and masks stop working, and the arrows break. So after all of this, we finally reach the topic at hand: armor. Which pattern do you think it'll follow from these? If you're like me, it would seem to make the most sense to follow the pattern of weapons, working perfectly until 50% and then slowly dropping off after hitting the threshold. But if you're like me, you're wrong. Surprisingly, armor values actually follow the food restoration pattern, working completely linearly from 100% to 0%, matching the values shown. So what does this all mean? With armor, there's no safe zone. There's no durability value where you can leave it until a certain point, like with weapons. Every 1% off of that armor is having a real-time effect on your protection, and it's not comforting to know that. Additionally, it adds a very difficult question. When is the best time to repair my armor? There's no threshold. It's not clear when it stops losing functionality. But it's also not practical to be spending 6 metal scrap every time your armor gets chipped. So, here's a solution. The main function of armor to me personally is, of course, to stop damage. But as much as armor does aid in PvP, I'm more focused on the survival aspect. If you can reduce incoming damage from most things to be below 25% of your health, you won't bleed. In easy or normal mode, this isn't much of a problem, since normal zombies only inflict 15 default damage. But on hard or some custom modes, this is crucial when fighting zombies, as taking an accidental blow without bleeding is incredibly valuable, especially with the reduced supplies. So armor should always be maintained to stop the bleeding effect from zombies. I've taken each armor value into account, and this is when you should repair your armor for every vest in the game. In terms of PvP, things aren't nearly as cut and dry. Trying to play a percentages game isn't very effective, since the variety of weapons and situations you may find yourself in vastly differ from one another. The threshold that you deem acceptable for you is ultimately your call, and location, player count, resource availability, and many other factors will definitely influence it. Just know that good quality armor can save your life more than a few times, and even stop bleeding from some lighter firearms. If you're in your base or somewhere safe, just check that vest to see if it needs a quick fix up before you head out. It may just save your life.